So the support document for this session, which is on how to use the Q&A feature in Google Slides, is in the chat. It will be in the hub also. It's not there yet, but it will be there hopefully today. I have a lot of trainings and meetings today, but I'm hoping to also get some time to update the hub with those resources as well as yesterday's videos, which aren't there yet. Okay, and so the Q&A feature is actually something that's already built into slides. It's not a particularly robust tool. There aren't a lot of features. So let me share my screen. You can do whatever you would like. Chat or audio. I do get a pop-up that lets me know if you send something in the chat once I'm sharing my screen. So whatever works for you. So this is actually the support document, and I'm actually going to just use this to start, and then we'll do a live demonstration of the tool, okay? So what we have here is that it's basically a feature that the presenter in Google Slides turns on in order to accept questions from the audience that the presenter is presenting to. And then the audience actually watches the presentation. Hi, welcome, we're just getting started. So the audience watches the presentation. The support document is in the chat, and they have an ability to actually submit questions, and they can also vote up the questions of others. So vote up or down the questions that others have submitted. So that actually allows the presenter to know kind of which questions are questions other people in the audience also have, and therefore might be a good question to address. Obviously, in addition to the audience having a screen or a website where they can post their questions, the presenter can also see the questions at any time in order to be able to respond to them. So whether or not it will work for distance learning depends on a couple of factors, because there are some nuances to this tool. While the tool isn't particularly robust, welcome, I'm putting the support document in the chat for you. While the tool isn't that robust, there aren't actually a ton of features. There's not a lot you have to do. It's not complicated to use. There are some nuances that it is important to understand in order to be sure that it is the right tool to use at the particular time that you want to use it, and with the group of students with whom you want to use it. So students do have to be able to type in order to use this tool successfully. They can use it on a phone or a tablet or a computer or a Chromebook, but they do have to be able to type. They will also have to sign in with Google. Now, if they're using a device that they've been using for school, chances are all they'll have to do is click their little Google sign in address, and it'll just sign them in automatically, because by now they've been signing in with Google an awful lot, and their devices probably remember them now. So that will probably be pretty quick. And then they need either two devices, which may not work for a lot of our learners, or they need to be comfortable having two screens open at the same time. One for the teacher's presentation and one for where the Q&A is. Because as you'll see in the live demonstration, they are in separate places. They're not actually together. This has some ramifications for if you are doing this in a live setting versus setting it up for students to do on their own time. It is important to know that students can see each other's questions immediately. It's a little bit like the chat in Zoom. There's no moderation. You can't take the questions away. And they can post anonymously even though they had to sign in. So that it's not a feature you can turn off. So if you have students that you are concerned would make poor choices in that setting, then this is not the right tool for that particular class. So again, they can post anonymously and their questions post immediately. So you want to do this with a group of students with whom there is already kind of a classroom culture of mutual respect, where you are confident that they would not intentionally do anything inappropriate with their questions, if that makes sense. In that sense, it can provide still an alternative to posting questions in the chat in Zoom, and it doesn't even have to be done during a live Zoom meeting. There is a sort of a workaround that is available for doing this where students can watch the video on their own, or go through your slide presentation on their own, and then submit their questions. It's not a great workaround, but there is a workaround for that. And what's nice, even though it's similar to the chat in a live session in Zoom, in that there's no moderation and you can't delete the questions that the students have posted, it is different from the chat in that the students can actually vote up or down other students' questions in order to indicate if they have the same question and if they would like you to answer it. It's also good to know that if you leave the presentation, the Q&A remains available to them. However, the instructions in this section of the document will make more sense as we go down below, but there is a way for you to set it up so that it doesn't have to be during a live meeting, or if someone was absent during the live meeting but is going to be on their computer at some point during the day, they could still look at your slides and submit their questions to you for you to answer, perhaps in a follow-up email or in another mini lesson, or however you would like to respond to their questions. What would happen though is you would need to start the presentation on your device and start the Q&A session on your device and leave it running. So don't turn off your computer, don't close it, right? And then maybe give students a window of time and say, for example, these slides and the Q&A session will be available from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. You can do whatever in that time. You don't tell them you won't be answering questions live. They're just watching the slides on their own anyway, right? But you can, you could give them a window of time that you promise that you'll just leave the slide deck open and you'll leave the Q&A session open on your computer while you are doing other things during the day, and they can go in at any time to do that. So the other piece, and then I give more instructions for how to do that. I'll come back to that later because it'll make more sense later. So let me close this a little bit. Here's essentially what this support document has, a kind of what do you do step by step with a screenshot of each piece. And then we'll do a bit of a live demo. Again, you're getting pretty good now at toggling between all your windows. So for the live demo, you'll probably need to have both your Zoom window visible as well as your Chrome window visible, but that will come a little bit later. You'll see the answer to that in a bit. Okay, so first of all, when you present a Google Slides presentation, normally everybody just clicks the present button and most people ignore the down arrow to the right of it. You actually have a presenter view with audience Q&A and speaker notes as an option instead of the typical just present from the beginning. So you would choose the down arrow and choose presenter view. When you do that, it will open up this screen, and it always opens to speaker notes, but you want to go to audience tools. So click audience tools. And if you forget, like you hit the present button, you're like, oh my God, I didn't do the Q&A. It's all right, because at the bottom of your screen, when you open your presentation and you have your slides and you can go from one slide to another, you actually have the Q&A feature built into the tools at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so if you forget to launch it as a Q&A session from here, you have another opportunity once it's already started by clicking Q&A at the bottom of your screen after you have launched your Google Slides presentation. So you're on Audience Tools, and you can tell because that's where the underline is. So there's two sections. There's a Speaker Notes section and an Audience Tools section. You want to be on Audience Tools. And all you have to do is hit Start Now. And then you can adjust the settings. So sign in is not required, but actually, I'm just going to change this to share. I actually experimented with that and it doesn't matter. They have to sign in with a Google account no matter what. The only difference is it doesn't have to be a San Juan Google account. So if you were doing something with parents and you wanted to allow parents to participate in a Q&A, for example, you could adjust this setting where it says accepting questions from San Juan Unified School District, and it says accepting questions from anyone. However, even if you say anyone, they will have to choose a Google account in order to participate in that feature. as you can see, there is a link provided. This is the link you're going to give your students in order for them to participate in the Q&A portion of this presentation, or in order for them to have access to that feature. And as I said, and as you'll see in the live demonstration, it actually opens itself in a new window. So this is a specific link. You could do something such as, especially if you're not doing this during a live Zoom meeting, you could do something such as open your slide presentation, or put a note in your Google Classroom that says, tomorrow there will be a new lesson posted. Please check back tomorrow morning in Google Classroom to get the link to both the lesson as well as the link to the question and answer document that you will have, and you would put both of those in your Google Classroom. Yes, I do. I love the tab resize split screen. However, the tab resize, for today's demo, it won't work because today you're going to need to have Zoom in one. Well, it does work if you launched Zoom from your browser, actually. I always launch it from the app. But if you have Zoom from your browser today, you could use the tab resize extension. So that's actually an extension. I have it. It looks like, oh, I don't know if it's on this Chrome account, actually. I probably turned it off. Let me turn it back on. Hold on. There we go. Alphabetical order. Tab resize. So tab resize is an extension that is a blue box with a white diagonal two-sided arrow, and it actually allows you to put two screens side by side on your computers. Thank you. In any case, when you share the link with your students, you could, if you're not going to do this as a live lesson and you need them to access both your lesson content and the Q&A feature, remember, they'll need two links then. They'll need one link that goes to the lesson, whether you made a video recording of your slide deck or you're just giving them a slide deck on its own for them to review. And then they also need this special link to the Q&A, and then you need to start those and have them open the whole time. But you could tell your students in advance the link for the slide deck for your lesson and the link to the Q&A feature will be available at 8 a.m. on May 1st, and the Q&A session will remain active through 6 p.m. or whatever time you designate and prefer to use. And then what students see, if you're doing it live, like in Zoom, what students will see is the slide deck slide. So this is actually a slide from one of my slide decks. And at the top, it actually tells them where to go in order to be able to ask a question. So you can see why for your learners, you need them to be old enough and comfortable enough with their devices that they could navigate having multiple things open. In the meantime, your presentation is now open in two tabs. One tab is the presentation itself with the Google Slides, and the other tab looks like this. It actually has a time for how long your presentation has been running, what slide you're on, what slide is coming next, the fact that your question and answer is active, but the questions have not appeared yet, okay? And then if you did have speaker notes in your slide deck, you could toggle over to see the speaker notes instead, as you'll see a little bit later. What the students see, so this is your Q&A tab. Your students' Q&A tab looks like this. Slides Q&A, Google Drive and Kami for families and students is the slides presentation. They're invited to ask a question. And at this point, there's no other questions in the slide deck in the Q&A area. So it just says no questions yet, be the first to ask one. Notice that when the students then click inside this box to ask a question, they have the option to ask anonymously. They have a 300 character limit, and then they can submit their question. As I noted earlier, all students can see all questions, and they can vote any question up or down in order to indicate to you if they feel like that's a question the teacher really should devote some time to and provide some responses and examples for. If you accidentally closed your session, remember how I was saying it could even happen during your presentation. Like if you accidentally closed the tab with the Q&A, or you even just, if you close your Google Slides that this Q&A is attached to, it kind of shuts down the thing and it's done, right? It's okay, you can reopen it and get it back. And the way you do that is you reopen the presentation, and you reopen that Q&A feature that we saw much earlier, how to do that a couple of different ways. So you can reopen the Q&A from the bottom, or you can reopen the Q&A directly when you reopen the presentation if you accidentally closed it. And what it will give you is it will actually say, hey, did you want to start a new Q&A session, or did you want to continue the Q&A session that you already had going? So you say continue recent, your recent session will appear, and you can hit the continue button. And now it will actually pop back up, including the questions that had already been asked in that Q&A. So it's not totally gone. And then I did mention that there's a speaker notes feature. I think it will be better when you return to your physical classrooms, because if you were to go here on your screen, your students would see your speaker notes as well. However, if you are adept at using 2 devices, or even 2 different, I would find this easier on 2 devices, but you could use like 2 different tabs or 2 different browsers. I would recommend 2 browsers actually. When you share a screen in Zoom, you can only share 1 screen, right? So if you're sharing your Chrome window and you open something in Safari, the people in Zoom can't see that, if you're kind of following my drift. So that would allow you to actually have the Q&A open on your screen. And actually, as you can see, the Q&A, if you open the Q&A in another browser and your students are in a live meeting in Zoom and you're sharing your Chrome screen, they won't see the Q&A feature if you're a Mac user and you have it open in Safari, for example. So that is one way that you could do that, but I think this would be much easier when you're in the live classroom setting, because in the live classroom setting, this screen is only on your computer, and what projects to the classroom screen is just the Google slide. It's set up that way on purpose. Okay, so that's it for the help document. So let's take a look at what this looks like. And I'll have to toggle between a couple of screens, but I'm going to go over to my presentation. Okay, and if you're comfortable doing so, you can actually join in, because that will make the demo work better. So I'm going to pull down this present arrow and I'm going to choose presenter view. Okay. And now what it's done is, you are probably seeing this tab that I have open right here. And in this tab is my full screen presentation, right? So this is where I was saying you have 2 tabs open. One is your full screen presentation. If you're in Zoom, and these 2 tabs are like this, anytime I click to the presenter side, it's going to actually show everybody in my Zoom window that as well. Hold on, please. All right, so that's why I say this could be challenging to use in a live meeting, actually, unless you use it on 2 different devices, which I actually played with, or you use 2 different browsers or something like that, because otherwise every time you click over here, your students see, you know, your speaker notes, if that's what you're showing, and so on. But if you don't mind, if you, for example, wanted to, if you don't use the speaker notes portion and you're just doing audience Q&A, you could do it in a live meeting and just toggle to see the questions. Everybody can already see them anyway. It's not a secret. The questions are appearing on their devices, as you'll see in a moment. So I'm not going to continue recent because, well, actually, let's see if that works. I'm going to continue recent. And I'm going to choose continue. All right, so here's the question that had already been answered. And if I go over here, there you go. If you're comfortable opening up a new tab on your device and having Zoom available to you at the same time so that you can see my presentation, please go to the website that's at the top of my screen, slides. And this works great on phones. So if you want to pull out a phone and do the Q&A from there, it works great on phones. So slides.app.goo.gl / lowercase o f h capital R lowercase f. Again, that is slides.app.goo.gl. Don't spell Google, it won't work. So goo.gl / lowercase o, lowercase f, lowercase h, capital R, lowercase f. Okay. So in the meantime, and as I said, if you happen to have a phone handy, this works really nicely from a phone, and it also works really nicely on a tablet, a Chromebook, or a laptop. So this is a really easy tool. And I happen to be on my phone right now as well. I'm in there as another user so that I can answer a question. And I know you probably can't see my phone very well because it doesn't usually show up when I try to show it, but there you go. So you can see the Q&A feature right there on my phone. And it's a nice, easy interface that a lot of your students will be familiar with, where they can just type to ask a question, and they can then submit that question whenever they're ready. So for now, if I were to go through my presentation, this is actually what I need to do with my families this evening at a Families Matter workshop we're hosting for our district's families. And we actually got a lot of questions at last week's workshop from people who they just don't know what Google Drive is or how it works or why you use it. And of course, their kids are trying to figure out what it is and they don't really know. So I'm doing a little presentation on Google Drive, but I'm also including Cami because that question came up a lot as well. Since the students are starting to get questions about Google Drive, and they're starting to get assignments in Cami. So what I'm hoping is that you'll actually go on your phone or on your computer and try posing a question so that we can all see what happens when more questions come in. And I don't actually, you can ask a question, you know, that you normally would have put in the chat, or you can ask any other questions you want. I'm just hoping to look for some other questions to come in. Yay, thank you, Maria. And then if you see a question, so there's a new question in there. If you see a question that you would like answered, you probably notice that you could upvote or downvote any particular questions. My dogs love humans. My dog definitely loves humans. And then, so I can upvote a question, right? And now if you take a look at your screen again, there's a question that's been upvoted and so on. So as you can see, it's a really interesting tool that could be great, right? As long as you already know your students well enough to know that with the particular class you'll be using it with, they will use this feature appropriately. Because as the creator of this, if I go over here now, I can't delete anything. You can all see the questions. Now what I can do is I can pick a question and actually present it to you. Now what happened when I did that? Hold on a second. If I go over to the present screen, there we go. So what if you're in a now this is for the live meetings. This isn't if you're just having them watch it on their own time, but I actually posted one of the questions because I have another option, and I'm going to appreciate your patience here because I'm actually going to screen capture that. I didn't have that already. So I'm going to hide it. In your audience tools area, you can choose to present a question that someone has asked. Actually, I'm going to pick a different one just for fun. And then it's also telling me that, hey, there's a new question that is now your top question. Oh, hold on. It's blocking the present window for Tim's question for me. Show. So it's showing me that, there we go. Okay. You know what? I don't know about anybody else. I have not yet had my coffee, but even when I do have my coffee, I will tell you that my coffee is always decaf because I don't need caffeine. So there we go. There's a little bit more information than you probably needed. To start now, I'm actually going to add this. Okay. And I'm going to add this thing here. Teachers can show any one question during a live session. So in other words, this won't really work, you know, if students are just watching, if students are just watching the slide deck on their own, but I can click the present button. And when I do that, and I'm going to do it again now, yeah, we're going to have to close that. When I do it again now, back on my slide deck, what it does is it actually takes that question and it presents it to the class. Again, this only works if you happen to be using this feature during a live meeting. Okay. All right, so let me check the chat and see what other questions you have. Oh, that's not a question. No, just a statement that people who know me know I apparently don't need caffeine and should not be given any. And then when I'm done with that, I don't believe, let's see what happens if I say I want to present 2 questions. Let's see. Let's present another question. No, and as you can see, you can only present 1 question at a time because it doesn't know what else to do, but it made a slide. Now, if I hide and I go back to my slide deck, you'll notice that the question I presented isn't in the slide deck. It didn't get added as a new slide. It's just temporarily presenting it to your audience. This is why that particular feature of choosing a question to present only works if you are in a live situation with your students where you are presenting the content live to them, okay? And as I said, there is a strategy by which you could, like I could leave this running. If I leave these 2 windows open and just go about my work for the day, you can come back in at any point in the day and ask more questions. Now that said, in order for that to work, remember your students need access to the slide deck separately. You have to give them the slides or give them a video of you as you present the slides so that they can independently go through the slide deck. Because otherwise they have the link to the questions, but as you can see here on your screen, the slides are not visible. There's no way for them to review the slide deck here. My speaker, this is my page as the presenter. I can see what the current slide is, what my previous slide is, and what my next slide is, right? But on your screens, when you go to the Q&A, all you see is the Q&A. So if you would like students to do this on their own time, be sure you give them the slides and you give them the link to the question and answer session. They will need both. And it doesn't have to be a true Google Slides link because you could use Screencastify and record yourself presenting the slides and give them that and say, okay, class, sometime on May 1st, I want you to review this short video that I made and then post your questions in the Q&A. If that makes sense. Any questions? Believe it or not, that's it for this tool. It's not, like I said, it's not that robust. I know, I understand that, Tim, that the anonymous feature. Now, interestingly, in order to get in, I mean, they can all be anonymous, right? They can all choose anonymous. And that's what I said at the beginning. You really have to make a decision for the particular classes that you are hoping to use it with as to whether it is the appropriate tool for them, right? They do have to have some typing. They do have to sign in, but they can see each other's questions immediately and they can post anonymously, right? You have to make the decision if that works. And in my case, when I was a high school teacher, it would have worked for some of my classes and not for others. But I also had a very unique situation where, at least in some cases, there were students I actually taught all 4 years of high school and many, many more students that I taught for 2 or 3 years. So I knew them really well. They knew me really well. They knew each other really well. It was very different. And so I knew that with, particularly with usually my year 3 and absolutely every year, I can't think of a single year with my year 4 and AP classes where I would not have been able to use this feature. Okay. But that came from the fact that we had a lot of history together. There was not a single year where I could have used it with French 1 or French 2. Just because, as you said, they are not really skilled yet at thinking through the consequences of their actions and the decisions they make. That's just brain science. We know that. And they aren't good at making good choices because of that. So I would not have used it with my students in that case. No, anonymous are anonymous for a reason. The only thing you know for sure is that they had to use their Google sign-in to get in there. So if you limit it to San Juan Unified, it did have to be one of your students, but you will never know who it is. That's why it is anonymous, unfortunately. No, as I said at the beginning, as I said at the beginning, this is not, there is no way to turn that feature off, unfortunately. That would be a good ask of Google, but there is no way to turn that feature off. So hold on a second, I'm trying to get back to here. I'm just trying to see if I misrepresented the session based on something someone said. So what this says is, it says here in the description, did you know that Google Slides has a Q&A feature? Use this during live class meetings to collect and respond, even if you have chat turned off, and so on. So, and the title says using Google Slides Q&A feature. So
I know, I don't go to that. I just see what Nicole Cooper
oh,
puts
maybe
out.
she didn't post my title.
Puts out the title. And I just go, hey, I'll Q&A.
Well, do you have a Q&A for us now? Since you came, you might have had a question.